50 miles south of Sicily, right there, smack in the center of the Mediterranean, you got Malta and Gozo. And look, if you've ever even glanced at the history of these islands, you know they're home to some structures that just, they defy explanation. I'm not talking about, Roman ruins or medieval forts. No. We're talking huge megalithic temples like Antigua. I mean, they use stones weighing upwards of 50 tons. Just massive.
It's incredible.
These things were put up by a really sophisticated Neolithic civilization. And here's the kicker. They actually predate the famous Egyptian pyramids. By over 1,000 years. It's kind of hard to wrap your head around that timeline.
It truly is astonishing engineering, yeah. Above ground, you have these monumental temples that look like giants built them.
Yeah.
But today, we're actually going even deeper. We're focusing on the subterranean counterpart to these structures, the Ħal Saflieni Hypogeum. Now, this isn't some natural cave system. It's a vast, meticulously crafted, rock-cut complex, probably meant to be, an acropolis, a shrine, for rituals. And for you, the listener, what's really key here is how it was found, basically through pure destructive accident. It popped up in 1902 in Paola. Some construction workers were digging cisterns for new houses and just, bam, broke right through the ceiling into this huge underground space.
Wow. And that accidental break-in, that's just the start of what has to be one of the most, frustrating archaeological stories ever. So our mission today is to take a real deep dive into the Hypogeum's unique architecture, and the really unsettling history of archaeological loss surrounding it. Plus, the enduring mysteries which are highly controversial, including those legends of giants, and the unsettling truth behind some really bizarre physical evidence that's still around. Let's dig in.
All right, so when you look at the Hypogeum, you just realize the sheer genius it took to make it. It's been described quite rightly, I think, as architecture in the negative, which means, they weren't stacking stones up.
No.
They were carving space down, just meticulously taking material away to create rooms and passages. And that carving went incredibly deep. The whole complex spans 3 distinct levels, all interconnected, plunging down 11 meters below street level. Just to use some context, 11 meters, that's deeper than a modern 3-story building is tall. And they did this around 4000 BC.
Think about that effort. Seriously. The earliest bits date back to then. So this enormous space, thousands of square feet dug out with only primitive tools, like stone hammers, antler picks, chisels, flint blades. And they weren't just digging a pit, they were sculpting chambers. Chambers that actually mimic the look, the details of the big temples above ground.
It really speaks to an incredible dedication, doesn't it? And organizational effort within that society, which honestly makes the later history of the site even more infuriating. The builder's precision was just immediately countered by the discoverer's carelessness.
That's the bitter irony, isn't it? So the original construction workers, they realized how huge this find was. And they actually tried to hide the discovery back in 1902, just to avoid stopping their, lucrative building project.
Yep. It took 2 whole years before it was officially reported and sort of secured.
Unbelievable.
And the chaos just continued when proper digging finally started. The first lead excavator, Father Emmanuel Magri, he was a really critical figure, a Jesuit, ethnographer, archaeologist, but he died suddenly in 1907. He was on a mission in Tunisia. And the huge loss here isn't just the man, it's that all of his crucial field notes just vanished, gone with him. We lost the first, probably most detailed record of a site that had already been messed with.
Oh, man. Imagine spending 5 years carefully documenting a whole civilization's necropolis, only for the historian's version of your master archive to just disappear forever. The frustration. It must have been immense. And it seems like the problems didn't stop there, did they? Even under Magri's successor, Themistocles Zamet, the guy revered as the father of Maltese archaeology.
Right. Despite his reputation, our sources are pretty clear that Zamet oversaw this massive, really inexcusable loss. His team dug up huge amounts of human bones and, well, they were discarded without being properly cataloged. We're talking critical primary evidence, just treated like, construction debris. It's just a catastrophe, historically speaking.
Wow. If Zamet was that sloppy, if he let thousands of unique artifacts just vanish, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? Were they actively trying to hide something even back then? Or did they simply not grasp the sheer importance of what they'd found?
It's hard to say for sure. Well, speaking of artifacts that did manage to survive Zamet's work, let's move into the middle level of the Hypogeum. This is where the artistry, the skill the builders put in becomes really obvious. Heritage Malta calls this the star of the show, and they're not wrong.
Absolutely. The walls, the ceilings here. They're covered in these intricate red ochre paintings, spirals, spots, honeycomb designs, and they visually echo the karst doorways and lintels you find in the temples up top. It suggests this direct visual link between the world of the dead below and the ceremonial spaces above.
And this level also gave us one of the most famous, really beautiful artifacts they recovered, the Sleeping Lady statuette. It's this wonderfully detailed little clay figure. Shows a woman lying on her side on this precisely carved bed or couch. It's super significant because it gives us this rare peek into furniture, maybe domestic life, from the Maltese Neolithic period.
That's amazing. But beyond the visuals, there's something else going on here, something unique with sound, isn't there? The real marvel seems to be the acoustic engineering, especially in that chamber they call the Oracle Room. This sounds like Stone Age tech meeting mystical experience.
That's exactly it. The Hypogeum isn't just some quiet tomb, it's basically an acoustic instrument. The Oracle Room has this specific, small niche carved into the wall, and it has these astonishing acoustic properties. If someone speaks into that niche, particularly in a low-pitched voice, often associated with a male voice, the sound gets dramatically magnified. It resonates, it travels throughout the whole complex.
Whoa. So this wasn't just accidental resonant properties, they engineered sound travel. And researchers actually detected specific frequencies in that resonance. What were they, and why do those matter?
Yeah, the research pinpointed a double resonance frequency, specifically at 70 hertz and 114 hertz when that niche is activated. Now, why those numbers? I mean, if you're listening now, 70 hertz might just sound like the deep rumble of a bass speaker, but these frequencies are actually highly relevant to, well, human physiology.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit. What are the implications of those specific frequencies?
Well, lab testing on brain activity suggests that 70 hertz is close to the frequency that encourages theta wave activity. That's often linked to deep meditation REM sleep. While 114 hertz is associated more with the start of alpha brainwave states linked to relaxation, reduced internal chatter. So basically, the resonance of the chamber itself could have supported ritual chanting, helped the people inside achieve a kind of mystic consciousness maybe, or an altered state. Without drugs, they were using architecture to tweak the mind.
That is profound. I mean, a Stone Age sound system designed to alter consciousness.
Wow.
Wow, if you shift back to the main purpose, it was mostly this massive necropolis, right? An ossuary, a final resting place. But the whole debate about how many people were actually buried there seems just as chaotic as the excavation itself.
Oh, the numbers are wildly all over the place, which is, a direct result of that lack of proper cataloging we talked about. Zamet, initially, he estimated around 7,000 individuals were buried there over the centuries.
Okay, 7,000. But then, just a few years later, his own assistant comes out with a completely different number.
Exactly. Zamet's assistant published this report in 1920, dramatically claiming the Hypogeum held the bones of, wait for it, 33,000 people who had supposedly been sacrificed by some ancient cult. That number, 33,000, is clearly sensationalized, right?
Yeah, sounds it.
Later on, much more rigorous analysis working only with the few materials that did survive being thrown out suggested something different. From the roughly 7,000 bones they actually recovered and could study, maybe only about 120 individual skeletons were ultimately identified. I mean, the gap between 120 and 33,000, it's vast. And it just tells you how much reliable data was lost right at the start.
Okay, so the loss of most of the bones is a tragedy in itself. But it leads us straight to the most controversial evidence that did survive. The skeletons, and especially the skulls that remained.
Right. And this is where the story gets, well, even darker, maybe stranger. Most of the remains were found just completely jumbled, heaped together in a haphazard manner, as the reports say, disjointed. This strongly suggests what's called a secondary burial practice, where the bodies were maybe left to decompose elsewhere or perhaps deliberately defleshed, maybe even ritually consumed. We don't know. And then only the dry bones were brought into the ossuary later.
A collective, kind of chaotic graveyard then. Was there any exception to that jumble?
There was one, yeah. One single intact human skeleton was found. And it didn't show signs of that secondary burial stuff. Instead, its position suggested what the researchers described as a severely emotional death. They pointed to the contorted, tightly clenched wrists and fingers of the right hand. It sort of implies this moment of really profound distress, either at the time of death or maybe when the body was placed there.
That's deeply unsettling, especially contrasted with the sheer mass of disordered bones around it. But the biggest oddity, the thing that really captured global attention, involves the skulls that survived. Zamet himself, who was a trained doctor, remember, he documented at least 12 skulls that were strikingly long-headed. Dolichocephalic is the term. They look almost well, alien-like compared to typical human skulls we see today.
And this wasn't just like a slight variation in shape. One of these really peculiar skulls apparently lacked the sagittal suture entirely. That's the seam that runs along the top of your skull, joining the two big parietal bones.
Right. Explain quickly for the listener why that's basically impossible for normal human development.
Well, the sagittal suture is absolutely critical. It allows the skull plates to shift and overlap slightly during birth, and then expand as the brain grows really rapidly in infancy and childhood. A skull that fuses that suture too early, a condition called sagittal synostosis, severely restricts brain growth sideways. It forces the skull to grow long and narrow. For a fully formed adult skull to completely lack it, it suggests either catastrophic, really early, intense artificial binding, or, much more controversially, maybe a fundamentally different biological structure underneath.
And this kind of evidence, it led to some pretty wild speculation very early on, didn't it? This idea of an alien race.
Oh, yeah, that definitely became part of the public narrative early in the 20th century. You can trace it back pretty directly to that widely read 1920 National Geographic report. It actually stated that the first inhabitants of Malta were potentially an alien race with elongated skulls.
Wow. Okay, so what's the standard anthropological explanation for this today?
Well, most mainstream anthropologists would argue pretty strongly that this elongation is the result of artificial cranial deformation, or head binding, the intentional practice of shaping the skull from infancy. It was a tradition found in various ancient cultures all over the world. However, it's worth noting that Zammit himself observed that at least some of the Hypogeum skulls seemed naturally long, not necessarily deformed by binding.
And this leads us right into the heart of the modern mystery, doesn't it? Because those unusual skulls, they aren't exactly easy to see today.
No, they are not. And this is the crucial point. These specific, highly controversial skulls were effectively hidden from public view after 1985. They were reportedly moved into storage, and apparently they're extremely difficult for independent researchers to get access to. And this decision to basically suppress the physical evidence has naturally just fueled intense speculation. People wonder if authorities are trying to conceal facts that maybe contradict the neat official historical story.
Yeah, I mean, given the sheer scale of the architecture, those mysterious acoustics we talked about, and then this really unsettling cranial evidence, it's maybe no surprise that Malta is just steeped in legends of giants.
Right. The megalithic structures themselves, above ground, they're permanently tied into the local folklore. Specifically, that story of Sansuna, the giantess, who supposedly built the massive temples like Agantija, while carrying her hybrid baby, no less. I mean, the name Agantija literally means giant's tower. Exactly. And the idea of actual physical giants wasn't just ancient folklore either. Gianfrancesco Abela. He was the 17th century chancellor of the Order of the Knights of St. John. He actually claimed to have personally collected these enormous bones that he believed belonged to 10-foot-tall giants. Now, we know today those were almost certainly prehistoric elephant bones, but the belief that massive beings once lived on the island, that was widespread.
Okay, so let's shift gears from ancient folklore to more modern, maybe verifiable conspiracy lore. And that seems to involve the Hypogeum's restricted deeper levels and this widely circulated story about missing children.
Right. This centers heavily on the account of a woman named Constance Lois Jessup. She was British, and her passport confirmed she was definitely in Malta in the mid-1930s. She claimed that during a private tour she took, her local guide, a guy named Joe, led her through this secret small doorway on the deepest third level of the Hypogeum, took her into a deeper, usually restricted area.
And what did she say she saw down there? In this cavern, supposedly 50 feet below the ledge she was on.
Her report is, well, it's extraordinary. She claims she saw about 20 figures of giant stature. She estimated them between 20 to 25 feet tall. She described them as having elongated heads and this shaggy covering of white hair. And they were beckoning her from the darkness below. Apparently, Joe, her guide, was terrified and immediately let her out.
Wow. Okay. And the follow-up to her story is just as weird, right?
It is. When she came back years later, hoping to prove her story, that deep passage she said she went through, boarded up, sealed, and the new official guide working at the Hypogeum completely denied that her original guide, Joe, had ever existed. Just wiped him from the record, essentially.
Jessup's really specific account kind of ties into that famous, though definitely unverified urban legend that circulated for generations, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The story of the 30 school children and their teacher who supposedly vanished into some collapsed passage in the Hypogeum and were just never seen again. That terrifying story even made its way into a 1940 issue of National Geographic, which is pretty significant.
Yeah, it is. And all these claims, the vanishing guy, the alleged giant sighting, the urban legend of the disappeared kids, they're all sort of set against the backdrop of the Hypogeum's current really tight restrictions. Today, all the tours, they're limited strictly to the first two levels. That's it. Furthermore, visitors have to remain completely silent throughout the tour. And you're absolutely prohibited from bringing cameras or even phones inside.
Okay, limiting access, sure, that's understandable for preservation. But forbidding any photography and insisting on silence, especially those main chambers, it definitely adds to the air of mystery. It raises legitimate questions, I think, about what authorities might be trying to prevent people from documenting, or maybe what sensitive acoustic details they want to avoid drawing attention to, especially regarding those deeper levels that are still sealed off. So we've taken our deep dive into the subterranean secrets of Malta, the Ħal Saflieni Hypogeum. It really stands as this breathtaking example of Neolithic engineering, where you have cutting-edge archaeoacoustics meeting deep, persistent folklore about giants, those strange elongated skulls and missing documents.
The paradox just remains glaringly obvious, doesn't it? How did Stone Age farmers, who were operating without metal tools, without the wheel, how did they achieve such advanced, precise construction, such a sophisticated acoustic design? And why are so many crucial pieces of evidence, from Father Magri's vanished notes to potentially thousands of discarded bones to actual access to the deeper levels, why are they so effectively veiled or suppressed, both historically and even today?
It's this strange mix of incredibly advanced knowledge somehow coupled with appalling archaeological negligence, or maybe something more deliberate. It really forces you to question what we truly know or think we know about this whole epoch of human history.
Definitely. And here's a final provocative thought for you, the listener, to maybe carry forward. The same people who built the Hypogeum also created the Anajra temple complex above ground. Now, the alignment of that temple suggests a really sophisticated understanding of astronomical precession. Some researchers argue it dates the site's alignment way back to around 10,200 BC. That's just after the cataclysmic Younger Dryas period, the time of the global Great Flood stories. So considering this potentially impossible astronomical knowledge from that era and the precision of the Hypogeum's acoustics and architecture, what other advanced secrets did these magnificent builders possess? Secrets that we maybe haven't uncovered yet from the parts of that underground complex that are still sealed off from us today.